everyone. Welcome to Love and Life's Journey. I'm Chantel, and I thought I'd give you a little bit different scenery today. But if you're new to my channel, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you like DIY projects and Dollar Tree DIYs and DIYs on a budget, then be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell and set those notifications so that you'll be notified when I upload new videos. Today I have a really cool project for you. Now usually I do a lot of easy DIYs, and while this one isn't particularly hard, it is kind of involved, and so just be aware that it may take a little bit longer, but I go step by step through it and you could totally do it. Just follow the steps, and even if you're not real confident, just give it a try. I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world if it doesn't turn out perfect, and it may just help build your confidence in crafting. So I encourage you to give it a try, but it's totally worth it. This project cost me $6 using items from Dollar Tree, plus some paint and just a few embellishments that I had around the house. So it's totally worth it. It's super cute. It is a reversible for fall and winter decor piece. So let me show you what it is, and we'll get started with the tutorial. So here's the piece that I'm going to be showing you today. It is this really cute scarecrow that when you flip it over is a really cute snowman. So you can use it all through fall and winter. For this, I will be using 4 of these Beware signs from Dollar Tree that they have in their Halloween section. I'll also be using 2 of these witch feet stakes, and these are going to be used for the brim of the hat. First, I'm going to cut off the ribbon hangers that are on the 4 signs, and then using some wood glue, I'm going to glue them together. You could use E6000 or some other type of strong glue to do this, but I'm just using wood glue because that's what I have on hand. Now I'm going to flip one of the signs around so it's upside down, and the reason I'm doing this is so that the holes are not on the same ends. So when I flip them together, I'm going to put the right sides together, so you're going to see the back side of these signs, and then this is going to make it so the holes don't go all the way through, and it will be easier to fill them with some wood filler. Then I'm going to take a generous amount of my wood glue and just glue these signs together. And then I will repeat this for the other 2 signs. Then I'm going to take these 2 pieces that I glued together, and I will glue them together down the middle as you see here. And just a note, you don't want to get too much glue in the center here, because I had a little bit of trouble with it kind of seeping out through the seam, which wasn't a big deal on this top part because I could wipe it off, but underneath I wasn't able to wipe it off, and it kind of glued itself to my cardboard underneath, and so I had to kind of scrape and sand that off. So just something to be aware of when you're gluing these together. Then I'm going to push them together, make sure they're all lined up, and I'm going to add some heavy things to the top to hold it all down and together while it dries. And I did decide to use some clamps because I had them on hand. I don't think that you have to do this if you don't have clamps. I will put a link in the description box below for some clamps like the ones that I have. These are really handy to have for these types of projects, so if you're interested, the link is in the description box below. While my glue is drying, I am going to take the 2 witch feet stakes. I don't know what to call those. I guess that's what they are. But I'm going to pull the witch's feet off of the stakes, and they're just stapled on, so I just did this carefully so I didn't break anything, but they pulled right off. And then you could use those for a different project if you like. Then I used a hammer to tap the staples out a little bit, and then a screwdriver to kind of pry them up, and then some needle nose pliers to pull them out. So the main thing is they did have a tendency to break off, so you just want to do this carefully and make sure you get a hold of them well so that you can pull them out. Next, I need to cut down the stakes, and I want to get rid of that pointed end. So from the flat end, I'm going to measure 16 inches and then cut down the stakes. I'm going to be using a miter box and saw to cut down these stakes. You can get these really inexpensively. I think they have them at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon, and so I'll put a link in the description box below. But these are really handy for cutting small projects. You just put your project in there, put your wood piece in there, and just use the guide and saw it. You can saw angles or straight. It just is a really handy tool, and it's not very expensive. And I'm just using a piece of sandpaper to sand the edges, kind of round the corners a little bit, and just get off any rough spots. And as I said earlier, I had some glue kind of seep through that seam and stick to the cardboard, and so if that happens to you, you just want to make sure to take some sandpaper or a sanding block and just sand that down as smoothly as you can. Then I'm going to take some wood filler, and I got this at Hobby Lobby. You can pick it up at any hardware store, but I'm just going to take a little bit of that and a putty knife and fill those holes, and so that I'll have a smooth surface to paint. And once the wood filler is dry, I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper and sand it down so that it's nice and smooth. Next, I'm adding the brim of the hat to this piece, and I wanted it at an angle, and so I just kind of eyeballed it to see where I wanted it, and the high end was about 8 inches from the top and about 10.5 on the low end, but I just marked on the wood where I placed it so that I would know where to put the glue and then glue it down. And if you add a little bit of hot glue to this during this step, then you won't have to weight this down and wait for the glue to dry. I didn't do that on this first one, but I did do it on the other side. When you glue the brim piece onto the other side, you just want to make sure that it lines up perfectly with the first one. I decided to paint the snowman first, so I am going to be using some black craft paint. This is Apple Barrel that I picked up at Walmart for really cheap, like 59 cents or something like that. And I'm going to paint the snowman's hat using this. I'm also painting the brim and all of the edges of the hat with the black as well. And right about now is when I am wishing that I would have painted the brim before I glued it on, because it was a little tricky to paint this bottom edge of the brim. I'm just using a napkin and I put it up against the edge to help cut that in a little bit easier. And next I'm going to paint the snowman's face with ivory chalk paint. And I did have to do 2 coats of this. Actually, I did 2 coats of the black on the hat too, just to make sure it all had good even coverage. And then again, I'm also painting the sides and the bottom of the snowman's head. Next, I'm going to use a yardstick and I'm going to draw some lines because I want to make this look kind of like it's shiplap. So this would have been easier if the brim of the hat wasn't on it already, but I'm just lining it up along every other little notch in the top and the bottom so that I'm going to end up with, it looks like 4 slats. So here you can see I've drawn lines on every other notch, and that gives me 3 lines, so it's going to divide it into 4 sections. I'm going to be using some Waverly elephant colored chalk paint and a really tiny liner brush, and I'm going to paint my lines on. If you're not comfortable with painting the lines, you can certainly use a Sharpie marker or paint marker to draw the lines on instead. One tip if you want to paint your lines on is to get a little water and mix it into your paint, and that will make the paint flow a little bit better. Just make sure you don't have any drops of water on your brush because they'll drip onto your project and make a mess. But just adding a little bit of water to your paint will make it flow better, and then you can just practice doing those nice thin lines. If you do happen to make a mistake, you can always wipe off what you can, paint over it with the white paint, let it dry, and then try again. Then I'm going to take a bigger, fuller brush and get just a little bit of paint on it, brush off the excess, and then I'm going to dry brush a little bit on all over the white part of the project. I'm going to go along the edges and just make it look a little bit worn and distressed. Then I'm going to paint the lines on the hat and do the dry brushing using the same elephant colored chalk paint just like I did on the white part. Next, I'm going to trace the snowman's face pattern onto the piece, and I do have a link in the description box below where you can download this if you're not comfortable drawing your own snowman face. And if you need to use the pattern, you can just flip it over and on the back side rub with a pencil across every part of the pattern like you see me doing here. And then once you have that all covered with the pencil lead, then you can flip it over and then trace over the pattern with your pencil, and that will transfer the pattern to your wood piece so that you can see where to paint. Again, I am just using the black apple barrel craft paint and a paintbrush. Again, if you're not comfortable painting this, you can certainly use paint markers or Sharpies to do this. It's totally up to you. Next, I'm going to paint the nose just using some orange craft paint that I had on hand. You can use any brand or shade of the orange that you have or pick up. And I did have to do several coats of the orange paint on this. Then I'm going to take some pink colored paint. This is called Gooseberry Pink. It's by Americana. Any kind of blush colored pink will do. And I have a stipple brush that I put a little bit of paint on, and I'm taking the excess off, and then I'm just going to kind of pounce around in a circle right above where the ends of his mouth are, and this is going to make some cheeks. And a tip here is you want to start light because you can always go darker, but if you go too dark, then you have to paint over it, and so it's best just to start light and add as you go. And another tip, if you don't have this kind of a paintbrush, is you can just use a napkin and kind of twist it to make a point, and I'll actually show you how I did that when I do the Scarecrow side. And then I'm going to just take my brush and some more of that black craft paint and paint his mouth. Whenever I paint faces, I always add this one little detail that just brightens it up. You want to take a small paintbrush and use the end of it, dip it in some white paint and get a little bit of the excess off, and then just do a little bit of a dot right on the eyes. I usually do it kind of in the top corner of each eye, and that just brings those eyes to life and just makes it more whimsical. I'm also adding a little bit of detail to the nose. I'm just taking a little bit of that ivory colored chalk paint and adding a few lines where the nose kind of dips in on the top, and then a few highlights along the top edge. And then I'll also be taking some truffle colored chalk paint and adding a little bit of shading to the bottom of the nose. This looks a little bit more like shadow, and it just adds some dimension and detail to it. And this is something that could be done using a fine tip paint marker as well. And now the snowman face is done. I think it is adorable. It's so cute. So once all that paint is dry, then it's time to flip it over and work on the Scarecrow face. If you have any dust from sanding on your piece, make sure you wipe that off. And then for the Scarecrow, I'm going to be using the truffle colored chalk paint, and then another Waverly chalk paint called Cashew. It's a little bit more yellow than the ivory. Again, I'm doing the same steps that I did before with the snowman. I'm drawing the lines so that I can have those 4 sections to make it look like shiplap. And to paint the lines for the Scarecrow, I'm going to add a little bit of the cashew to the truffle, and I'm going to mix a color because I didn't want it to be too stark or dark or stand out too much. So I decided to mix a color. If you have a color that is, kind of in between those two, lighter tan or brown, you can just use that, but I decided to mix my own, and so I just mixed them until I got something that I was happy with. And then I'm going to do the same steps and put the lines on the whole piece, his hat and his face. Then once the lines are done, I'm going to take that bigger brush and do the dry brushing along the edges and basically all over the piece. And I actually add a little bit more dry brushing to the Scarecrow because I want him to look a little bit more distressed. Once again, I have a pattern for the Scarecrow's face. The link is in the description box below to download that so you can print it off. And I'm going to do the same steps and transfer that to my piece. Then using the black craft paint and that same orange color that I used on the snowman, I'm going to paint the Scarecrow's face. Then I'm going to take that same gooseberry pink color, and this time I'll show you how I did the cheeks using a napkin. If you don't have one of those stipple brushes, I just kind of wrapped it around my finger and dipped it in the paint. And again, I just started really light because I didn't want to get too much, but then I'm just kind of adding it in a circle. And as you can see, it has pretty much the same effect as the stipple brush. Then I paint his mouth, and I also decided to add some eyelashes to this. At first I was a little nervous that it would make it look a little feminine, but I don't think it did. I think it just kind of added a little bit more whimsy to his eyes. And then of course I'm going to add that white dot in his eyes to brighten them up. It did take several coats of the orange paint to cover up that line that went down the middle that I painted, so it might be a good idea to trace the face on before you paint the lines and then not paint a line through the middle of the nose. Once the paint is completely dry, I'm going to take this clear matte sealer by Rust-Oleum. I picked this up at Walmart. It's about $3.96. And I'm going to spray the one side with a light coat of this just to help protect it. Then when that's dry, I'm going to turn him over and do the same thing for the other side. Once the sealer's totally dry, it is time to add some embellishments. For the Scarecrow, I'm going to be using some of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree, as well as some raffia. You can pick this up at Dollar Tree too. And then I'll also be using one of these flowers from this bunch I picked up at Dollar Tree. It says it's a daisy, and I guess it looks like that, but it also reminds me of a sunflower, so I'm going to use that. First, I'm going to cut a square of that burlap ribbon. Now this stuff frays really badly, and I decided to use hot glue to attach this first one. Really, I think Mod Podge is a better idea. It's kind of messy, but I think it adheres it much better and helps keep the fraying down. But for this one, I attached it with hot glue. Dollar Tree is now carrying a whole lot more craft supplies, at least at some stores. This was one of the new ones I found. These Crafters Square finger protectors. They are silicone. They go on the end of your finger, and they are so great for protecting your fingers from that hot glue. Next, I'm going to take several pieces of raffia, and I'm just going to glue it along the bottom edge of the hat so that it looks like the Scarecrow's hair. Then I'm going to take about 3 strands of raffia, and I don't know, these are probably about 12 or 14 inches long, and then I'm just going to tie them into a bow. Then I'm going to glue the raffia bow to the top of the brim of the hat and add one of the flowers. And I actually meant to put these on the other side to kind of offset that fabric patch, but since I didn't do that, I decided to add a little bit of a patch on the other side of the hat to kind of balance it out. Sometimes when you're crafting, you just have to improvise. For this patch, I decided to use the matte Mod Podge, and I think it worked a lot better. It took quite a while to dry, but I just brushed some onto the burlap ribbon, and then I stuck it down and brushed some more over the top, and then I just let it dry. And it does dry clear. I know it looks white here, but it will dry clear, and this really helps keep that burlap ribbon from fraying. Now that the scarecrow's done, it's time to add some embellishments to our snowman. I'm using this burlap ribbon I picked up at Dollar Tree last year, but I'm sure they will have something very similar to that. And this has a nice holly design to it, and I'm going to use that over the top of the brim of the hat. This was pretty easy to glue on with the hot glue, so I decided to use that. And because the ribbon is burlap and the hot glue seeps through, it's good to use that finger protector. Next, I'm going to add just a little bit of pine greenery to that hat band, as well as a little sprig of red berries. And for my last step, I'm going to trim off the extra ribbon that is hanging over the edges of the hat. And he's finished. I love this. It is so cute. It's just a decor piece to stand up anywhere. I have it on my hearth here, on the scarecrow for fall. And then as soon as Thanksgiving's over, I can flip it over and have the snowman. I am so happy I decided to do this project. I know that it had a lot of steps and it was kind of involved, but I hope you decide to try it. It's well worth it. It turned out so cute. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell and set those notifications so you'll see my upcoming videos. Thanks again for watching and have a blessed day.